So I completely quit social media a little over a year ago now. And I've done a couple of videos on this, just reflecting on it. But I was doing sort of my big annual review, reading through my old journals, just kind of reflecting on 2024. What are some changes I made, that kind of stuff. And one thing that stood out above everything else was one of the best decisions I made in the last year or so was quitting social media. And by that, I don't count YouTube in that. Someone always comes in the comments like, YouTube, social media too. Whatever. If you want to count it, I don't care, but I don't count it. When I say quit social media, I got off of Twitter, I got off Facebook, got off Instagram, got off of LinkedIn, all of that stuff that I felt like was using up an inordinate amount of my time. And even as somebody who I run an online ministry, my income even is dependent on my ability to reach an audience. So it kind of seemed like maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I shouldn't quit social media, but I did it. And the results have only been positive a year later. So I'll share a couple of, I guess I have 9 things I wrote down here, lessons I've learned from quitting social media a year ago. First one, and this is the headline, I should have done this sooner. I wish that I'd gotten off of social media in 2018 when I first was like, I don't really like this. I wish back then I had the fortitude to actually follow through with, hey, I'm going to get off of this. And I didn't do it. And that's the one thing with all the benefits and the different things I've learned in the last year being off of there. That's the one I always go back to is I could have experienced all these sooner. So if you're somebody who's like, hey, I'm thinking about getting off social media. I've never met anyone who has regretted it. Maybe there's somebody, but I've never met anyone who has deleted their accounts and been like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. At least for me, I can speak just for myself, all upside. The second lesson that has really, I guess, become a conviction from this is convenience is a vice, not a valid excuse. When it first became like a serious internal dialogue with myself, like, should I get off social media? All these ideas started popping in my head. But what about this? What if this? It's just so much more convenient. My photos are on Facebook. I can connect to people. What if I need to do this? And there's all these 1,000 little what if things that pop up. And one of the things I noticed that just about all of them had in common is that they were conveniences, that it's not impossible to do those things. Find somebody, get a hold of someone. There's all these different things that objections that people have. They're mostly issues of convenience, not of necessity. And that was the thing I kind of ran into was, yeah, trying to make life more convenient. It's not necessarily bad, but we have this trend as a society and technology enables this, where we see convenience as a virtue. Oh, and at the very least, it's our excuse for not making changes in our life we know we should. I had the same, internal debate when I later in the year decided, hey, let me get off of my smartphone too. That's the trajectory you're on, by the way. If you're like, hey, I think I'm not getting social media, in the end, you're gonna find yourself in a cave, being lit only by fire and eating salmon. Just saying. But that was for me. That was it. I applied the same thinking of, hey, some of these arguments I was making for saying I should stay on social media applied also to this debate I was having about, should I keep my smartphone or is it too much of a distraction? And ended up believing that too. So convenience is a vice, not a valid excuse. That's a principle I'm trying to carry with myself now, is there is such a thing as blessed inconvenience. Some things in life you want to be inconvenient. More convenience is not always better. Third thing I learned was that when you limit your options for procrastinating, you procrastinate less. What I mean by that is one of the things I discovered getting off of social media was one of the hopes I had for it was that I would be more focused on the work I needed to do without the option of going on Instagram or scrolling Twitter and seeing what the reformed world is mad about today. I realized, hey, like I can focus more. And so when those obstacles would come up during my day where I'm supposed to be working on one thing, but it's kind of getting complicated, I'm like, let me go procrastinate for a little bit. Not having the option, not having it readily available that I could just hop on Twitter and scroll for a bit or jump over to Instagram. Having the option eliminated to procrastinate meant more often I was just pushing through. I was like, I'll just do this. And so I think there is something to be said for just limiting your options for procrastination, right? And some people will say like, oh, it's just a willpower thing. You just need to be more disciplined. I get it. I do get it. But at the same time, sometimes it's helpful to sort of save your willpower for other stuff and just make it harder on yourself to do the things you don't want to do. The fourth lesson I learned from quitting social media for a year was that when you tune out, you're not necessarily missing out. In fact, more often you're gaining perspective, right? This is the whole FOMO thing. This held me back for a while about like, oh, if I tune out of what's happening on Twitter, for example, that was my poison of choice. I really liked Twitter. If I tune out, I won't know what's going on, right? Whether it's news or for me, it was more like trends in the Christian world. I like to be tuned in what was going on with those discussions, those debates. And so I had the FOMO thing, fear of missing out. But what has been interesting is as I've been totally tuned out from that stuff for over a year now, I feel like I have a better perspective. People will tell me about debates that are going on right now on Christian Twitter, which is a nightmare, some of the stuff that I hear people talking about. And I'm just instantly like, okay, like I'm coming at it, I guess, with some more objectivity. I don't have a dog in that fight, I feel like, with a lot of the debates that are going on. And so I can sort of assess it and be like, no, I don't know who those people are, but that perspective seems crazy. That seems out of alignment with scripture. Whereas I can think back when I was on there, I was in the midst of that stuff. And like, this is my team, that's your team. When these big debates would come out, I would take seriously ideas that shouldn't be taken seriously. And I realize I have a bit more perspective because I'm choosing to miss out and not be in on that world. And I think that's true more generally too. You know, whatever your thing is, you're like, I want to know what the latest trends are. I want to know what's happening in the news. Guys, the important stuff you get wind of it. Someone will tell you. Yeah. And it's kind of nice not to be so jacked into every tragedy or every act of terrorism or every crazy thing that you're supposed to be mad about today. Dude, it's so much better just not being plugged into that stuff, because then you have greater perspective. So that's the lesson there. When you tune out, you're not missing out, you're actually gaining perspective. Fifth lesson I learned quitting social media for over a year was leisure with other people is harder, but more fulfilling. So I did a video in a podcast, I don't know, a couple months ago now on a theology of leisure. You can look that up. And in that, I did some research into leisure, into what people did for rest and entertainment throughout history. And one of probably the most surprising things I discovered in researching that topic was that historically, most leisure was a communal activity, right? I had to, for example, with music, if I wanted to hear music, I would have someone play the piano for me, or I'd play it. You'd get together at someone's house, someone would play, or you know, if you had money, you'd go and you hear people play music, and it was something you did together, right? People provided their own entertainment; they didn't outsource it. But as our society has progressed with technology, if you want to call it progress, entertainment and leisure has become more and more a solo endeavor. Even the things you do with other people for leisure, like watching a movie, are actually an isolated thing you happen to be doing side by side with someone. You're not entertaining each other. You're not providing the source of your enjoyment and your recreation and your leisure. You're actually just having your own individual experience that you happen to be doing with someone else. So I talk way more about that in that other video if you want to look it up. But in the absence of having access to social media as much, my need for social interactivity, that itch, is scratched more from being with people. Specific for me, it's mostly my family, spending time with them, finding my joy and my recreation with them instead of like trying to get that from a screen. But it's just opened me up to that it takes a little more effort to be with other people, to be entertained by that, especially if you're more introverted. But it's more fulfilling, right? The rest, the recreation you actually get from that, I found, to my surprise, is more fulfilling, more restful, I just feel like a more complete person, when I think I'd been believing this lie that I needed time alone to scroll and do that stuff to sort of decompress from the day. But I don't think it was actually giving me the rest that I thought it was. Number 6, boredom is the space where creativity happens. I think before last year, I would have said this was true, that you need to create space for boredom in your life if you are someone who's creating things, right? I create videos and podcasts, I write books, things like that. Okay, how do I write my books? Well, I come up with the ideas usually when I'm walking, with nothing in my ears and no screens in front of me. And I found in the absence of being on social media, in the absence of being on my phone, I have more boredom. And that's kind of painful, kind of annoying. I don't really like it that much. But what comes out of that is the fruit of creativity. I have more ideas. I'm able to spend more time with those ideas, develop them. They're richer. They're more significant. If you want to be creative, you have to have boredom in your life. I don't think that those two can be separated. Obviously, you need input and inspiration from other things, but you need the boredom. That's where ideas percolate and develop, and different ideas synthesize together into a new thing. Happens in the space of boredom. But in modern society, boredom has to be fought for. It used to be just an incidental part of life. I've got to walk to work or to the field or whatever. I'm going to spend some time alone. It's just part of life is you spend a lot of time alone processing stuff, boredom, and creative things bubbled out of that. In modern world, you have to fight for it. And that usually means eliminating distraction, eliminating social media, eliminating the phone. For me, been a big source of greater creativity and productivity, and I've been happy with that. Seventh lesson I learned from quitting social media over a year ago is that massive results usually come from massive changes, not tiny tweaks. So for the longest time, ever since about 2018, when I first started thinking about getting off social media and the issues with phones and things like that, I kept believing this idea that what I need to do is not get rid of my phone. It's not get off social media. I need to limit screen time. I need to have a little spot in my house where I keep my phone when I'm home so it doesn't distract me. Or I'll do little tricks to keep my apps from distracting me, right? I've done videos about this too. How to set your phone in grayscale mode so it's less distracting. Keeping social media icons off your phone. Blah, blah, blah. That stuff can help, but it helps to a small degree. Little tweaks lead to little change. But actually, sometimes if you want big change, you got to make big changes. And it seems like a big change. It is a big change to say, I'm going to delete all my social media, or I'm going to not use a smartphone, and do that not just because it's a trend or because, you're trying to be different, but because you recognize that if I want big changes in my life, I'm going to have to do things radically different. And so I think that's a principle that applies to more than just this question of social media or smartphones, but generally in life. If you want different results, you're going to have to do things different. And it usually means doing things significantly different. Number 8 is I learned that business growth is fueled by extreme focus. So like I said, I run Redeeming Productivity. We have a membership program, and this is my main gig, right? This supports our family. This is my calling in life to help Christians with personal productivity from a biblical worldview. And so part of my job is to make sure that calling, that the business around that works properly, that it's able to provide it's self-sustaining financially, and that it sustains our family financially. And so I have to be thinking about growth. How do we add more members to our membership? How do we make sure the budget's balanced? All that kind of stuff, right? And for the longest time, I saw social media as the thing that would help me do that. Right? Because that's what people tell you. If you're a creator of any stripe, that's what everyone says. You got to get on social media. Now you got to post on Instagram 10 times a day. Now you got to post on Twitter, whatever it is. All the stuff you got to do. But what's interesting is not having social media, just from a business perspective, got me off of the hamster wheel of trying to post 20,000 times a day, and instead focus on those few activities that actually moved the needle. And that has helped me even with other ideas, this idea that I need to be extremely focused. That helped me do the thing about quitting side hustles. Again, I did a video or a podcast about that too. You can look up not having a side hustle, not trying to do 10 different things, but to really laser that focus in on a few important things and just hammer those. That's going to be more important than spreading yourself thin. And so that's true in business. I think that's true in life too. You got to be focused if you want to grow, and you want to grow fast. You can't do everything all at once. And the ninth and the final thing I would add that I learned from this year off of social media, and I say a year off of social media, I'm not planning on going back. I'm just saying it's only been a year and some change since I quit. But the thing I learned is you can't effectively steward your life with a divided focus. And this is the big thing. This is like the meta thing, is I want to be an effective steward of my life for the glory of God. All of this, and not just business, and not just my my health and my relationships, to all that stuff, my spiritual life. All of those things are part of my stewardship before God as a son of the King of Kings who was bought and paid for by the blood of Christ. This isn't my life. He owns me. God owns me. And so I'm going to make a good return for him in this life. I want to use it well. I want to be faithful. And I cannot effectively be a good steward if my focus is divided in 50 different ways. I can't effectively steward this life if I'm constantly thinking about, oh, I need to be doing this. Laser focus. That's what makes a good steward a good steward. You think about this even with the metaphor of stewardship, which scripture brings up in Matthew 25, right? The stewards are entrusted with different amounts of money. The ones that are faithful, they go and they think and they invest the money in the way that's going to get the best return. And if we could kind of press in a little bit there, my supposition is that they didn't invest at 50 different thousand places, that they couldn't keep track of all of it. It was just so complicated. But instead, they were really wise with how they invested and made a good return for the master. And I think the corollary there is we do that with our time. We invest our time in a billion different things. We're constantly busy, constantly frazzled. And because of that, we're not able to steward and make the most of the gifts the Lord has given us. He's uniquely created you to do certain things, to have a unique set of gifts, a unique set of opportunities, a unique set of resources. That's your stewardship. And if you try to do everything, you're not going to be able to lean into those things he's specifically equipped you to do. And so again, this is just a principle I learned that applies to all life, but I found that to be true from getting off of social media. When I did fewer things, I was able to invest myself more fully in the stuff that really mattered the most. And I guess this will be the bonus 10th thing, and then I'll stop. But this thought process led to what's sort of been the new framework we've developed for the Redeeming Productivity Academy and our new course on Christian productivity called Waypoints to Well Done. This 3-part framework is, if you can get clear on your priorities, that's step 1. What's my calling? What am I uniquely gifted with? Then you can get organized with your systems. How do I build my life systematically, intentionally, strategically towards that clarity of purpose God's called me to? And then how do I get consistent in those habits, in those things that help me to grow and be faithful in those areas? Get clear, get organized, get consistent. A lot of that, even that framework, was sort of the result of me getting off the social media and realizing that was all downstream from that clarity. What am I here for? What am I supposed to be doing? I can't do everything. So what can I do? What are the priorities? Then organize around those priorities and get consistent with the habits that help me do those priorities and not distract myself with a bunch of other stuff. Yeah, well, that's what I got. Hopefully something in there is helpful for you. If you're thinking about getting off of social media, my advice, your situation might be different from mine. That's a caveat. My advice is do it. You're not going to regret it. I haven't at all. If you want more help with Christian productivity, with thinking about time management, personal productivity, self-development from a biblical worldview, do check out redeemingproductivity.com/academy. That is our full program that teaches you, 9-week program that teaches you how to effectively steward your time, how to do this with the mindset of a Christian. And we actually give you a planner, a bunch of different workbook to help you apply these principles. So I hope you check it out. There's a 7-day free trial. You can get a taste of it. And if you like it, stay. And if you don't, that's fine too. Go give it a try, redeemingproductivity.com/academy. Thanks for watching or listening. I will see you here next week.